I was reviewing quarterly reports when my phone rang. Unknown number, but something told me to answer. Mr. Rodriguez? This is James Mitchell from Apex Acquisitions. I'm calling about the potential purchase of Rodriguez Manufacturing. My blood turned to ice. I'm sorry, what purchase? Well, your representative contacted us last month about selling. We've been in negotiations for weeks. I assumed you were aware. My heart hammered against my ribs. 35 years I'd built this business from nothing. Nobody had my permission to sell anything. Who exactly is this representative? I managed to ask, though I dreaded the answer. Your son, Michael Rodriguez, along with his stepfather, David Chun. They said they had full authority to handle the transaction. The phone nearly slipped from my trembling hands. My own son, my own flesh and blood, had tried to steal everything I'd worked for. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife ever could. I stared at the email James had sent me, and there it was in black and white. Michael Rodriguez listed as authorized agent for the sale of my company. The signature looked convincing, almost perfect. But I'd never signed anything. Below Michael's name was David Chun, my ex-wife's new husband, listed as financial advisor. The same man who'd whispered poison in my family's ears for 3 years. The same man who'd convinced Linda that I was holding everyone back. My hands shook as I scrolled through the proposed terms. They were selling my life's work for 30% below market value. A fire sale designed to move quickly and quietly. The worst part? The buyer contact information showed weeks of correspondence. This wasn't some impulsive decision. This was calculated, methodical betrayal. My son had been planning to destroy me for months. I sat back in my leather chair, the same one I'd bought when Michael was born, dreaming of the day I'd pass this empire to him. How naive I'd been. I confronted Michael that evening at the family dinner Linda had insisted on, one of her power plays to show me how united her new family was. I got an interesting call today, I said calmly, setting down my fork. Michael's face flickered with something. Fear? Guilt? But then David leaned forward with that smug smile I'd grown to hate. Finally figured it out, did you? Michael laughed. Actually laughed. Dad, your little company is wasted in your hands. You're stuck in the past, too scared to make real money. Linda nodded approvingly. Michael's right. You've had your chance, Roberto. Time to let the younger generation take over. The business isn't yours to sell, I said, my voice rising. Isn't it? David smirked. You're getting old, Roberto. Accidents happen. People become incapacitated. Better to sell now while you can still enjoy the money. The threat hung in the air like smoke. My own family, plotting against me at my own dinner table. I was completely alone. Word spread fast through the company. By the next morning, I could feel the whispers following me down the hallway. Some employees avoided eye contact. Others watched me with pity. In the break room, I overheard Sarah from accounting. I heard his own son is selling the place. Pretty pathetic when your own kid thinks you're a failure. My longtime foreman, Pete, shook his head sadly. 35 years, and this is how it ends. Poor bastard doesn't even know what's hitting him. During the staff meeting, Michael strutted in like he owned the place, which apparently he thought he did. He announced upcoming changes and new leadership opportunities without even looking at me. The younger employees hung on his every word. The older ones stared at their hands. David sat in the back, filming everything on his phone, probably documenting my humiliation for legal purposes. Linda watched from the doorway with satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. 35 years of loyalty, sacrifice, and leadership erased by my own son in 30 minutes. Everyone had already chosen sides, and I was losing. I hired a private investigator that afternoon. Within 48 hours, Maria Santos had uncovered the truth that made my stomach turn. The photos were damning. Michael and David meeting buyers at upscale restaurants, shaking hands in hotel lobbies, signing documents in law offices across town. This conspiracy had been months in the making. Your son's been telling people you're mentally incompetent, Maria reported, sliding a voice recording across my desk. Says you've been making poor decisions, forgetting important meetings. I pressed play and heard my son's voice. Dad's losing it. Early dementia, probably. He can't run a company anymore. It's embarrassing. The sale is really a mercy. He'll be grateful later. The lies were so detailed, so convincing. Michael had crafted an entire narrative where I was a senile old man clinging to power. Worse, David had been coaching him, teaching him how to forge documents, manipulate employees, even which lawyers to avoid because they'd actually verify my consent. They'd planned everything except one crucial detail. The buyer was honest. That night, I sat in my office long after everyone had gone home. The building felt like a mausoleum, 35 years of memories haunting every corner. I thought about Michael's first day here, age 7, wide-eyed as I showed him the factory floor. Someday this will all be yours, I'd promised. Now he was stealing it. I thought about Linda, how she'd supported my dreams when we were young and broke. Now she was celebrating my destruction. The rage started as a burning coal in my chest, spreading through my veins like wildfire. They expected me to crumble, to surrender everything I'd built because I was old and weak. They thought I'd roll over and die. They were wrong. I pulled out a legal pad and started writing names, connections, weaknesses. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd show them what 35 years of business warfare had taught me. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Dad, stop fighting this. You're embarrassing yourself. I smiled grimly and deleted it. The war had begun. The next morning, I shuffled into the office looking defeated. Slumped shoulders, tired eyes. The perfect image of a broken old man. Michael, I called weakly. Could we talk? About the sale. His eyes lit up with triumph. Sure, Dad. I'm glad you're finally seeing reason. In his office, my old office which he'd already claimed, I played the part perfectly. Confused questions about what's happening to my company. Worried comments about not understanding these legal papers. Michael ate it up, explaining slowly like I was a child. David joined us, barely containing his glee as he watched me supposedly surrender. The lawyers will handle everything, David assured me patronizingly. You just need to sign a few more documents. Then you can retire comfortably. I nodded meekly. I just want what's best for the family. Exactly, Michael beamed. Trust us, Dad. We know what we're doing. As I left their office, I heard them celebrating behind the closed door. They thought they'd won. Perfect. Let them get comfortable. Comfortable people make mistakes. While Michael and David celebrated their victory, I was busy following the paper trail. My accountant, Elena, had always been discreet and loyal, qualities that proved invaluable now. There are 3 offshore accounts, she whispered, sliding me a flash drive during our coincidental meeting at the coffee shop. All opened in the last 6 months. The money from the sale was supposed to disappear into a Cayman Islands shell company. The scheme was elegant. Sell my business cheap, then funnel the proceeds through multiple accounts to avoid taxes and alimony obligations. Linda would finally be free of any financial ties to me, while Michael and David would emerge as successful entrepreneurs who rescued a failing company. But here's the interesting part, Elena continued. David Chen's been skimming from the preliminary payments. Michael doesn't know his stepfather is planning to cut him out. A slow smile spread across my face. Honor among thieves was just a myth, and this particular den of thieves was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The enemy was already fighting themselves. I just needed to fan the flames. James Mitchell called me again 2 days later, his voice uncertain. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm having second thoughts about this transaction. Something feels off. Oh, I kept my voice carefully neutral. Your son and his stepfather, they seem more interested in closing quickly than getting full value. In my experience, that's usually a red flag. And some of the documentation doesn't quite match up. This was my opening. James, can I ask you something confidentially? Of course. Did they mention I was ill? Mentally incompetent? A long pause. Actually, yes. They said you weren't capable of running the business anymore. I see. I let sadness creep into my voice. James, I've built this company from nothing. 35 years. Every brick, every employee, every success. That's my blood, sweat, and tears. But my own son, my voice broke convincingly. He wants me gone. Jesus, James breathed. Mr. Rodriguez, I don't feel comfortable proceeding without speaking to you directly. This whole situation stinks. I understand if you want to back out, I said graciously. Actually, I have a better idea. Can we meet? Just you and me. Perfect. I started small, tiny comments designed to make Michael paranoid. Son, someone called yesterday asking about the sale. Said they'd heard rumors around town. Strange, right? Michael's confidence flickered. What kind of rumors? Oh, probably nothing. Just weird how word gets around. You know? Later that week, David, a supplier, mentioned seeing you at the Marriott with some executives. Hope you're being careful about confidentiality. David's jaw tightened. What supplier? Couldn't remember his name. Older gentleman, gray beard. Said you seemed intense. I watched the seeds of paranoia take root. Suddenly, every phone call was suspicious. Every meeting felt watched. They started checking over their shoulders, whispering more urgently. The beautiful thing about guilty people is they assume everyone else is plotting against them, because that's exactly what they do. At dinner, Linda snapped at David over something trivial. Michael accused his stepfather of talking too much about their plans. The cracks were starting to show, and I hadn't even begun to push yet. Pete Morrison had worked for me for 28 years, long enough to know where all the bodies were buried. He knocked on my door after hours, looking grim. Boss, I need to tell you something. About your boy. He'd overheard Linda and David in the parking lot, celebrating what they thought was my imminent downfall. She said, and I quote, "Finally, I'll destroy Roberto's precious legacy. He always thought he was so much better than me, so much smarter. We'll see how smart he feels when he's got nothing." The words hit like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. David laughed and said Michael was the perfect weapon, that using your own son against you was poetic justice, for all the years you supposedly neglected your family for the business. Pete's weathered hands clenched into fists. Boss, 28 years I've watched you sacrifice everything for this place, for your family. What they're doing, it ain't right. Pete, I said quietly, how would you feel about helping me save our company? His grin was fierce. Just tell me what you need. The next morning, I walked into Michael's office with trembling hands and a carefully crafted expression of defeat. I want to sign, I said, my voice cracking. I can't fight anymore. Just promise me you'll take care of the employees. Michael's triumph was intoxicating to watch. The gleam in his eyes, the satisfied smirk he tried to hide. Of course, Dad. You're making the right choice. David produced a stack of papers with theatrical flourish. Just a few signatures, and this will all be over. I signed everything they put in front of me, playing the part of the broken old man to perfection. My hands shook convincingly as I scrawled my name across document after document. What they didn't know was that my lawyer had prepared identical-looking forgeries. Papers that transferred nothing, authorized no one, and legally meant less than grocery lists. The real documents were safely locked away in my attorney's vault. But Michael and David left that meeting believing they owned everything I'd built. Let them think that, the higher they climbed, the farther they'd fall. Over the next week, I quietly assembled my team. Pete brought in 3 other senior employees, people who'd been with the company long enough to understand what was at stake. Elena, my accountant, provided financial intelligence. Maria, my private investigator, continued documenting every meeting, every forged signature, every lie. And James Mitchell, the buyer, became my secret weapon. I'll string them along, he promised during our clandestine meeting. Keep them thinking the deal's moving forward while you get everything in place. Why are you helping me? I asked. James smiled grimly. 20 years ago, my business partner tried to force me out the same way. I wasn't as smart as you. I lost everything. Consider this payback for both of us. The network grew stronger each day. Loyal suppliers who'd been approached about transitioning to new management began feeding me information. Clients who'd received calls about upcoming changes started asking pointed questions. Michael had tried to isolate me, but you can't run a business for 35 years without building real relationships. And real relationships don't die easily. Michael's arrogance finally got the better of him. In a moment of pure hubris, he posted on LinkedIn, "Excited to announce I'm leading the acquisition and modernization of Rodriguez Manufacturing. Sometimes you have to push the old guard aside to make room for innovation. Hashtag next generation, hashtag business transformation." The post went viral, but not in the way he'd hoped. Comments poured in from suppliers, clients, and industry colleagues, all expressing confusion and concern. Since when is Michael in charge? What happened to Roberto? This doesn't seem right. Local business reporters picked up the story. By evening, 3 different news outlets had called asking about the transition at Rodriguez Manufacturing. Michael panicked and deleted the post, but screenshots had already spread across industry forums and social media groups. David was furious. "You idiot. We specifically agreed to keep quiet until after closing." Their first major fight happened right in the office hallway, loud enough for everyone to hear. Michael accused David of micromanaging, while David called Michael an impulsive child. Linda had to separate them like schoolyard bullies. Their united front was crumbling, and I hadn't even revealed my hand yet. Linda threw what she called a transition celebration at David's country club, essentially a funeral for my career disguised as a party. The guest list was carefully curated. Business associates who'd never liked me, neighbors who'd grown tired of my success, and family members who'd always resented my achievements. I attended because refusing would have seemed suspicious. They seated me at a corner table like a tolerated relative, while Michael held court at the head table, accepting congratulations on his business acumen and forward thinking. David gave a speech about new leadership for a new era, barely concealing his disdain as he glanced in my direction. Linda raised her glass. "To Michael, for having the courage to do what needed to be done." The crowd applauded while I sat in manufactured humiliation, playing the part of the defeated patriarch. But I noticed something interesting. Several guests looked uncomfortable. Forced smiles, awkward glances in my direction. Not everyone was buying this performance. Good. Doubt was spreading, and doubt was exactly what I needed. 2 days after the celebration, I was working late when I heard voices in the conference room. The door was slightly ajar, perfect for eavesdropping. David's voice was cold and calculating. "Once the sale closes, we need to discuss your role going forward, Michael." "My role? I thought we were partners." "Partners?" David laughed. "You're 26 years old with 0 real business experience. You think I'm splitting a $30 million windfall with you?" The silence was deafening. But this was my idea," Michael stammered. "I'm the one who convinced Dad to sign. And you'll be compensated appropriately. Finder's fee. Maybe 5% if you don't cause any problems." 5%? You promised me half. "I promised you nothing in writing, kid. That's business 101. Something your father apparently never taught you." I heard Michael's chair scrape against the floor. "You can't do this to me." "Watch me," David replied smoothly. "Your mother's already agreed. She gets her alimony settlement. I get the business profits, and you get enough to start your own little venture somewhere far away." The betrayal within the betrayal was beautiful to witness. My enemies were destroying each other. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Michael confronted Linda that same evening, screaming accusations through the thin walls of David's house. I happened to be driving by, pure coincidence, of course, when I saw Michael storm out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. He called me 20 minutes later, voice shaking with rage. "Dad, we need to talk." "Of course, son. What's wrong?" "David's trying to screw me over. The bastard thinks he can cut me out after everything I've done." The irony was delicious. My son complaining about betrayal while trying to steal my life's work. Slow down, Michael. What exactly happened? As he ranted about David's treachery, I made sympathetic noises while mentally cataloging every admission, every detail about their criminal conspiracy. Maybe you should reconsider this whole sale, I suggested gently. No, the sale goes through, but I'm not letting David steal what's rightfully mine. What was rightfully his. The audacity was breathtaking. What are you going to do? I asked. Whatever it takes, Michael snarled. David Chun has no idea who he's messing with. Perfect. Let them tear each other apart while I prepared the final act. James Mitchell played his role brilliantly. He scheduled a final closing meeting with Michael and David, making them believe the sale was proceeding exactly as planned. I watched from across the street as they entered the downtown law office, Michael strutting with renewed confidence, David wearing his usual smug expression. Inside, James was putting on a performance worthy of an Oscar. Gentlemen, we're nearly ready to finalize everything. Just a few more signatures, and Rodriguez Manufacturing will officially change hands. Michael signed eagerly, probably fantasizing about outmaneuvering David. David signed carefully, no doubt calculating how quickly he could eliminate Michael from the equation. Neither realized they were signing worthless papers, documents that transferred ownership of nothing to no one. James called me afterward, barely containing his laughter. They actually fought over who got to sign first. Michael accused David of trying to steal his moment, while David kept making comments about Michael being too young to understand business protocol. How much longer can you string them along? I asked. As long as you need. This is the most fun I've had in years. Elena's call came at exactly 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, timing that couldn't have been more perfect. The accounts have been frozen, she reported with barely contained excitement. David tried to transfer the preliminary payments this morning, but the bank flagged the transactions as suspicious. It had taken weeks of careful preparation. Anonymous tips to banking regulators about unusual large-sum transfers and potential money laundering. Documentation of the offshore shell companies. Evidence of forged signatures on authorization forms. All completely legal and completely devastating. David's phone started ringing 20 minutes later. I could hear him shouting through his office door, demanding to know why his legitimate business transactions were being blocked. Michael panicked when he couldn't access what he thought was his money. The two of them spent the afternoon making increasingly frantic calls to lawyers, accountants, and bank managers, none of whom could help, because the accounts had been legally frozen pending investigation of potential fraud. The beautiful thing about criminals is they assume they're smarter than the system, until the system proves them wrong. And the system was just getting started. By evening, the alliance was fracturing completely. Linda called Michael in a panic. The bank says someone reported suspicious activity. They want documentation for every transaction. I don't have documentation, Michael screamed back. David said he'd handle all the paperwork. Well, David's not answering his phone, because David was busy trying to contact his lawyer, who was conveniently in court all day. I watched the chaos unfold from my office window as they gathered in the parking lot for an emergency meeting. Arms waving, voices raised, accusations flying. Linda jabbed her finger at David's chest while he backed away defensively. Michael paced in circles, running his hands through his hair. The golden boy was realizing that crime wasn't as easy as he'd thought. The stepfather was discovering that his carefully laid plans had fatal flaws. And the ex-wife was learning that her new husband might not be the brilliant strategist she'd believed. Three conspirators who'd been so confident in their superiority were now turning on each other like cornered animals. All I had to do was wait and watch them destroy themselves. Desperation makes people dangerous and stupid. Michael's final gambit came at midnight on Thursday. He used his old key card to enter the building, probably thinking the security cameras were just for show. They weren't. I watched the live feed from home as my son rifled through my desk, searching for documents he thought might save him. When he couldn't find what he needed, he did something that crossed the final line. He tried to forge my signature on a power of attorney document, one that would have given him legal authority to conduct business on my behalf. The cameras captured everything. His face clearly visible as he practiced copying my signature. The forged document in his hands. The moment he realized he was in over his head. But he went through with it anyway, probably figuring he had nothing left to lose. Wrong again. I called the police at 12:47 a.m., reporting a break-in at my business. Michael was arrested at 1:15 a.m., caught red-handed with forged documents and burglar's tools. The irony was poetic. My son, who'd accused me of being weak and outdated, had resorted to common burglary when his sophisticated scheme fell apart. The next morning, I called one final meeting. Michael was in jail, David was scrambling to find a new lawyer, and Linda was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of their failure. James Mitchell arrived at precisely 10 a.m., briefcase in hand, looking every inch the successful businessman. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, addressing the small crowd in the conference room, "I believe you all know James Mitchell from Apex Acquisitions." David and Linda sat rigid with shock. How had I gotten their buyer to come to my meeting? "Mr. Rodriguez," James said formally, "after careful consideration, Apex Acquisitions has decided to withdraw our offer to purchase Rodriguez Manufacturing through the previous representatives." David shot to his feet. "You can't do that. We had a deal." James smiled coldly. "Actually, we didn't. The documents you signed were preliminary agreements contingent on owner approval that was never actually granted." "But Roberto signed everything," Linda protested. "Roberto signed documents acknowledging he'd been informed of negotiations," James corrected. "He never agreed to sell." The color drained from their faces as the truth sank in. "However," James continued, "Apex remains very interested in acquiring Rodriguez Manufacturing directly from its rightful owner." He turned to me with a respectful nod. I opened my briefcase and began laying out documents like a prosecutor presenting evidence. Exhibit A. Recordings of my son telling potential buyers I was mentally incompetent. David's face went ashen. Exhibit B. Bank records showing the establishment of offshore accounts designed to hide sale proceeds. Linda gripped the table's edge. Exhibit C. Forged signatures on legal documents, witnessed and documented. Exhibit D. Security camera footage of breaking and entering, with clear intent to commit fraud. I looked directly at Linda, the woman I'd once loved enough to marry. Exhibit E. Recorded conversations planning to destroy Roberto's legacy and discussing my potential accidents. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "David, your scheme to cut Michael out of his share is also well documented. Michael, your burglary last night added criminal charges to what was previously just civil fraud. This is all circumstantial," David blustered. "Actually, it's not." I smiled. Maria Santos spent 3 months documenting every meeting, every forged signature, every illegal transaction. The FBI's white-collar crime unit is very interested in your offshore banking activities. The silence was deafening. "You wanted to sell my business? Congratulations. You've succeeded." The aftermath was swift and merciless. David's reputation in the financial services industry evaporated overnight. When word spread about the fraud investigation, his clients fled in droves. His consulting firm collapsed within a month. Linda's social standing, always so important to her, crumbled as details of the conspiracy became public knowledge. The country club crowd that had celebrated my downfall now whispered about her criminal associations. Michael faced serious charges: burglary, forgery, fraud, and conspiracy. His lawyer suggested a plea deal, but my son's arrogance remained intact. He insisted on going to trial, convinced he could charm a jury. He couldn't. The evidence was overwhelming, the crime was clear, and the victim, me, generated considerable sympathy. 2 years in prison, followed by 5 years probation and full restitution. Justice served cold. Meanwhile, Rodriguez Manufacturing's sale to Apex Acquisitions proceeded smoothly, because this time, the actual owner was involved. James offered fair market value, plus a consulting contract that would keep me involved for 5 more years. Not bad for a weak, outdated old man. The employees who'd remained loyal were rewarded with bonuses and advancement opportunities. Those who'd jumped ship? Well, finding new jobs proved difficult when their former colleagues shared stories about their disloyalty. 6 months later, I stood before the rebuilt Rodriguez Manufacturing, now Rodriguez Apex Industries, addressing a crowd of employees, industry leaders, and media representatives. When I started this company 35 years ago, I had 3 goals: build something lasting, create jobs for my community, and leave a legacy my family could be proud of. I paused, looking directly at the news cameras. My family tried to sell me out. They thought I was finished, that my time was over, that they could cast me aside like an old machine. The crowd murmured appreciation. But they forgot something crucial. I didn't build this company by accident. I didn't survive 35 years of business wars by being weak. And I certainly didn't get where I am by trusting people who smile while holding knives. Applause rippled through the audience. They tried to sell me out, I concluded, my voice strong and clear. But I sold them out instead. The applause was thunderous. Rodriguez Apex Industries went on to become one of the most successful manufacturing companies in the region. And I was finally free from family betrayal, free from false loyalty, free to build my legacy exactly as I chose. My son had been right about one thing. Sometimes the old guard does need to step aside. But sometimes, the old guard reminds everyone exactly why they're still in charge. Game, set, match.